Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. I am back from vacation. Unfortunately, I did bring back a cold along with it, so I am still feeling a little bit under the weather, and my voice is a little bit hoarse, so definitely bear with me as I get you through this video. But we got a lot to talk about on this update. Let's start off with the overall satellite picture. We've got a dominating ridge of high pressure that's really been locked and loaded over a good part of the desert Southwest and much of Texas. And on the northern periphery, we've seen these mesoscale convective complexes that's been inundated and sliding east-southeastward into the overnight hours. And this morning, this one's parked over Mississippi and dumped a foot of rain in parts of central Mississippi. We also have a northern periphery as well. They also been inundated with very heavy rain as late. The other day, upstate New York got pounded, and then Vermont got pounded, and then we had another complex that came through Arkansas, and now we have another series of storms that's coming in across portions of upstate New York. And this is just now kind of getting its act together, and that will move across, bringing some more high winds in that area, as well as more heavy rainfall. So let's take a look at the setup, because man, further south, again, it's been all about that dominating ridge of high pressure. It's really going to be taking over the headlines over the next couple of days with a lot of sinking air and a lot of record heat, really from coast to coast. Very rare do you see a hazard outlook from hazardous heat indexes all the way from the coast of California to the coast of Florida. So the whole lower 48 is under the gun with excessive heat. And that's just not going to go anywhere anytime soon, as we got a really dominating ridge of high pressure, and many records are going to be unfolding. But yesterday, we had some pretty significant storms. This is the latest update as the Weather Service is still doing surveys, but we did unfortunately had some tornadoes unfold across portions of Chicago region. So far, we've had up to 9 tornadoes reported as of yesterday, and they're still doing their preliminary, surveys in these regions. But that same system will continue to move across the east, and that's the same system that's going to be highlighted, over portions of upstate New York and portions of New England later on this afternoon. So in fact, we do see several areas of concern. I do feel we're going to have another complex is going to blow up east of the Rockies along this region. This is the area that could be seeing some big time hail producers. We're talking some of those golf ball, some of those tennis ball type size hail varieties. And this other region across portions of the Ohio Valley and especially upstate New York, this is going to be mainly a wind threat as well. And we do have a small tornado risk as well, but these areas have been saturated. The trees are really susceptible. So it's not going to take 70-mile-per-hour winds in these features. Only really going to take about 40 to 50-mile-per-hour winds could do a lot of tree damage up in this region because of the saturated soils, and those trees are going to be vulnerable to those higher winds later on this afternoon. So let's give you the breakdown in this update. So here's the overall wind outlook, and we do feel that's going to be higher probabilities of some higher winds, especially across upstate New York, across the Albany region into the Burlington region, across Vermont. These areas, again, have been really saturated over the last week or so with very heavy rainfall as these relentless systems keep training over the same areas. And yet we have another event unfolding today. And like I mentioned, we do have a tornado risk as well. It's a small one, but still definitely be concerned about, or an isolated spin up tornado later on this afternoon into the early evening time frame, and very heavy rainfall as well. So the further to the south, we do have that one this morning of that mesoscale convective systems that traveled east to southeastward. That's where they've got a moderate risk for excessive rainfall into play. They've already received some local areas of up to a foot of rain and some isolated spots in central Mississippi. And this is the same setup that dumped about a foot of rain just yesterday in portions of Arkansas. So these complexes produce very heavy rain. We're talking 2 to 3 inch per hour rainfall rates. And it doesn't take much if these systems kind of park itself over the same area for an extended period of time to do some very major flooding. And further to the north, we've got to be concerned about the heavy rainfall as well on top of the wind threat. So this is what makes this so susceptible and so concerning today across the Binghamton region, across the Syracuse region, but especially into Saratoga Springs, up into central Vermont. Those areas are going to be the highest areas concerned of the very heavy rainfall compounding with the wind. And we do have that isolated tornado threat up there as well. So definitely be on high alert for all three modes of severe storms compounding with the heavy rain. So some of these areas could add up another 5 inches, unfortunately, of more heavy rainfall in this region. So going into tomorrow, it's all about the ridge of high pressure as this continues to expand and dominate a good part of the South. So really from Texas, across New Mexico, across Arizona, getting into California and Nevada, the monsoon this year is pretty much non-existent. I mean, they need some rain, especially in portions of Phoenix. I mean, they're going to be, approaching their all-time record. This is, I think, day 14 of 110 plus. They're going to easily smash the record of 18 days in a row. So this could go on for at least another week or two, because definitely there's no end in sight with this ridge of high pressure, as that dominating ridge is going to be parked itself and really into the Gulf. I mean, it's just been on fire. This complements of this El Nino this year. The heat index values across the South has been just off the charts. I mean, some of these areas 115 plus some days, and these water temperatures down in the Gulf of Mexico is about as high as I've ever seen them. Places down here towards Marathon getting into the 95, 97 degree temperatures. I mean, that's almost like bath water down here. And this is why the heat indexes in Key West have been approaching 117. Miami getting into the 115 range. I mean, this is something they've never really seen in these areas. And it's just all complements of this very warm conditions out here into the Gulf of Mexico. And I don't feel like that's going to end anytime soon. And looking at the map, as far as the excessive heat warnings and the heat advisories, again, we pretty much have it just dominated over a good part of Texas and Oklahoma, much of the desert Southwest, getting into Arizona, much of Nevada, and pretty much the entire state of California is under heat warnings, as that ridge will just continue to dominate and expand in these regions. And the longer it sits over there, the warmer it's going to get. But going into Friday, the northern periphery, we have another mesoscale convective system forming on the northern side of this. So that puts more of Kansas into play, and even down to Oklahoma City again, into Tulsa. And they've seen numerous these complexes in the month of July so far. In fact, Oklahoma City is now the 5th all-time wettest July on record, with almost 8.5 inches of rainfall. And there's more convective complexes on the way. So they'll definitely be climbing up the leaderboard, especially with the month only about halfway over so far. So, going into Saturday, as the ridge of high pressure backs off across portions of the desert Southwest, that allows a little bit more of a northwest flow and dips the convection a little bit further south, but it also puts more into play back into Illinois again. Some of these areas with the tornado threat yesterday will be under the gun again on Saturday, with potential heavier rainfall back into these regions across Illinois, pushing into Indiana again, back into Ohio, and that sneaks down into portions of Kentucky, getting into western Tennessee. That'll be on the day on Saturday. But going into Sunday, you can see where the ridge of high pressure is. That's a 600 DM. That's about as strong as you'll ever see it, guys. Parked over Nevada, parked over Death Valley, getting into Arizona, back into Phoenix here, much of California. That opens the door again for more of a northwest flow. So if you're going to get any reprieve further south, maybe into Texas, especially in the northern branches of Texas, you could see those temperatures dip down at least one day for below 100 degrees, as most of the ridging will be locked over a good part of the desert Southwest. You've got most of the sinking air, and that high pressure is just basically parked over Las Vegas into the Death Valley region, and we could be seeing numerous records. In fact, the National Weather Service has up to 29 potential records breaking on Sunday. Notice the temperatures back into Texas. They do get a little bit of a reprieve. It's not much, but at least it's a one-day wonder of some isolated showers in these regions. But again, where these areas are highlighted, where these circle regions are, those are record high maximum temperatures across a good part of Arizona, across portions of California. This is why they've got the heat advisories in place. Parked over Nevada, getting into Idaho, portions of Oregon, even getting into Washington. By then, we're seeing some of those triple-digit heats starting to take fold, and this is a rare event. I mean, seeing this green on the map, that is 120 plus, folks. You don't really see that often. In fact, the latest update from the National Weather Service in Death Valley is calling for 131 degrees, folks. That is some serious stuff. It's been a long time since they hit 130, and if that were to happen, that's enough to cook a steak, medium rare steak. That's incredible stuff, folks. That's the kind of heat we're talking about that could unfold by the time we get into Sunday, as that ridge of high pressure will be dominating over that region. So as we go into that Sunday time frame, again, like I mentioned, as it's parked over a good part of the desert Southwest, that allows for a little bit of a northwest flow for areas not just in Oklahoma now, but further into portions of North Texas. Might be able to sneak in one of those mesoscale convective systems and at least give some of these areas a little bit of reprieve and get below the 100-degree mark and get some more needed rain showers within this region. Probably going to be more confined to the northern periphery of Texas, but definitely as you get into portions of Mississippi again, back into Alabama, they're probably going to be more in line of seeing that mesoscale convective system. But further to the north, again, this type of pattern is pretty much locked over. It's pretty much locked in place. So if as long as you're away from the ridge, you've got these convective complexes setting up again for another heavy rain event going into Sunday. So it's a compounding event. Upstate New York again, getting into Rhode Island, portions of Connecticut and Massachusetts, back into Vermont again, into New Hampshire, back into Maine, seeing potentially more heavy rain as under those saturated soils, and they desperately don't need any more rainfall. But going into next week, notice where the ridge is, right? So it's going to be backing off a little bit and moving back towards Texas. So it definitely comes back, and not this time, it actually expands a little bit further north into the plains. So as it does, this will bring all the sinking air and all the dominating ridge of high pressure and all the heat and then put the northern periphery, the storm threat, to the north side of this ridge. So as we transfer into Tuesday, there's the high temperatures. So you get the 105s back into portions of Dallas again, and then you can see back into 103 in Oklahoma City. The heat indexes are well into 110 plus range. You're likely going to see excessive heat warnings dominating these regions, as the ridge even go as far as north as Kansas this time. And that definitely puts the storm threat, further north. So as we go into that Tuesday time frame, you can see where the storm track would be, just to the north side of that ridge. So any storms or any rain that could come out of this feature by the time we get into middle next week is going to be well to the north along this periphery, getting in back into Montana, back into the Dakotas, getting into Minnesota, getting into the Great Lakes. And again, that puts more into play into portions of New England again, with more possibly another mesoscale convective system. But overall, the breakdown for the next 7 days, sorry, I'm gonna lose my voice here, for the next 7 days is just very intense heat across a good part of the Pacific Northwest, across a good part of the West, the desert Southwest, and much of Texas, and even into Oklahoma, and even in only the cooler temperatures in town is going to be the furthest away from that ridge. Is going to be put more or less into southern Canada, getting into the upper northern periphery of the United States, as well as into the Great Lakes, And then as far as the rain goes, obviously where that ridge is, there's not much to speak of in Texas, not much to speak of across the desert Southwest. We do have a storm down here, actually a hurricane that tries to sneak in and give some sort of reprieve back into the desert Southwest, but it hits that ridge and it just gets shut down, folks. There's no let up in this as the heat really starts to dominate and even shutting down hurricanes and not allowing them to get into that flow even going into next week. So just on the northern periphery away from that ridge, this is where the highlighted areas for the next 7 days is going to be seeing the rain across portions of the Texas Panhandle back into Oklahoma again. So they'll be adding to those totals in the Oklahoma City region. More rain from Mississippi back into Alabama. That puts the Illinois back into play, the Ohio Valley, and of course, good part of upstate New York and Vermont, New Hampshire, back into New England, where they definitely don't need any rain. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. On all those platforms. I actually do have a new social media site, Threads, the new Threads platform. So definitely look me up on there. So definitely catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.